I think the biggest thing is just get started. If you are really excited about whatever you're thinking about doing, if there's a product or an idea that you're excited about, just move forward. Don't get analysis paralysis, right? You can think about it and think about it and think about it, but what are you doing? Just do, even if it's a baby step, even if it's just one thing a week.
Hey, Uncommon Leaders, welcome back. This is the Uncommon Leader Podcast, and I'm your host, John Gallagher. Man, I've got a special guest for you today. Not only is she a friend of a lot of years, actually our best friend. She was the maid of honor in our wedding. Her husband was the best man. So, folks, I have a chance to really entertain you with some college shenanigans that we may have had before and some of our stories over the year. But we're here to talk with Susan Campbell, the founder and CEO of South 23rd. Now, I'm going to give her a chance to talk a lot about her company, but I'll tell you this, the approach that she's taken on her journey and, quote, just getting started. We'll talk a little bit about that in terms of how we get started later, maybe a little later in life. But her story is very inspiring and encouraging, and I look forward to talking with her. So, Susan, welcome to the Uncommon Leader Podcast. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, John. Thank you for having me.
Well, it's good. And I know I shared a couple questions with you, and we probably could have hit record even earlier on some of the conversation that we got going. So hopefully we didn't lose any of that. But let's just say this. I'm not letting you off the hook just because you're our best friends. I'm going to start you off with the same first question I start all first-time guests, and that's to tell me a story from your childhood that still impacts who you are today as a person or as a leader.
So I think when I look back on these last few years, I can see how an experience that I went through with my family and my dad when I was young. I was probably in middle school, and my father had come up with an invention. It was a can crusher, and he figured it out. He designed it, and I wasn't always watching to see what he did, but I do remember some of the pieces and processes. And then finally, they got to a point where he decided that he wanted to get a patent for it. And they went to DC. And I remember hearing the stories of going through the patent excuse me, and going through the library and talking to a lawyer and trying to figure out all that. He didn't end up getting the patent. And it was so crazy because just a year or two afterwards, someone else had introduced another can crusher, and it was on commercials. And he was like, that was my idea. And it was just kind of interesting to see it all take, kind of how it all took place. And that felt very familiar when I was working on my own. So that's something that really touched me, watching someone take their idea and just move forward with it.
Love that. And I think about that from an idea standpoint. And obviously that is really what brought us to this conversation today with regards to your company, South 23rd, and your product that we'll get a chance to talk to. The Porch Pop. I just love the name of it more than anything else. I think I just like to say Porch Pop more than anything else. But so linking that back, right, as having a family member, father that who had that entrepreneurial spirit, that innovative spirit that was going on. And certainly over the years, Susan has always been positive and inspiring in all of our relationships. Great mom, great wife, raised two phenomenal kids that I still love to connect with today as well. Was there a moment for you in your founder's journey, if you will, that you created the idea and decided, yeah, now's the time I'm going to make this happen?
Yes. It was kind of interesting. Our children are both married and living away. And it was about 2 weeks before our daughter was getting married. And this idea hit me. And I completely attribute it to God just blessing me with this idea. But when I came up with it, um, it was one of those things where I was in a transition. So I had just left my position as an optician. I'd been doing that for 7 years and realized that it wasn't my forever job. And I was just kind of in a space where I was able to explore this opportunity. And so that's when I decided, and it was just a little nibble, a little nibble, a little nibble, because I really didn't have any experience in any of this starting a company. Yeah, I would have ideas, but then once I really noodled on it, if you will, for a very long time over the next few months after Morgan got married, and then as we planned for Will's marriage, I was always working little by little on it. Did that answer your question?
Right, spot on, absolutely. I mean, in terms of understanding, and you, one of the things you talked about, the nibbles, like the little nibbles. I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about it. Thinking about it. And again, there was
Uh,
probably some point where you said, "No, I'm going, and I'm going all in." And I know that you're all in. I've heard you mention before, not letting what you don't know. You talked about that from maybe a business acumen standpoint, but not letting what you don't know stop you. How did you overcome that initial fear of what you didn't know to get started?
well, I think that my experience in sales, I have 15 plus years in sales in various industries. And I think the fact that getting no's and overcoming that fear of getting that no helped me with pursuing and finding out the answers. It was really kind of a challenge because I had no manufacturing experience. And so to continue and not stress about what I didn't know and just, I think the hardest part with all of that was trying to figure out what the next step would be. What would I need? And that's a space that I had never put myself in. So when I'm sitting there thinking about what would be the thing that I would need for this product, what does it need? Does it need fabric? Does it need a cut and sew? Does it need what kind of structure? Who would make that? So once you start peeling back those questions, you get further down. And it didn't really scare me too much because I had nothing to lose
Hmm.
at that point. I felt like
So that part of that was again eliminating that fear was what's the worst thing that can happen and talking through
exactly.
that. Diving into that though deeper in terms of the I'll call it the discipline or the habit. Like how did you learn where you needed to manufacture, how we were going to cut it and how do we get the colors and things like that? What were the steps that you took to dive in and make that happen?
Well, strangely, I think I probably started backwards. I started with a branding company. I had been put in I had created something on my a prototype, if you will. That's exactly what it was, but I didn't know how to sew, and so I purchased a sewing machine and kind of taught myself just enough. And then I got in front of a branding company because I was like, I need a name. I was jumping to the end.
Hmm.
And that is what helped me get to the back. And that was a group here in Greensboro. And they started telling me, well, this is great. However, you can't sew this yourself. You're going to need to have someone else sew this. You need someone like a cut and sew. And one thing led to another. They gave me a name, and that person was, I can't help you, but someone else can. And then they point me in this direction and this direction. And I finally landed in front of someone and they said, you need to take this sewn goods class. And of course, I thought I had it all figured out. So I was like, I don't need to take that class. I'm already way ahead of all of that. I've got this, this, and this. And long story short, 6 months later, I was in that class. And I said to myself, well, and I even told the instructor, I said, this was something that I felt like I didn't really need because I had already gone around and made all those phone calls. And then she was laughing at me. But there were nuggets that I took from that class. Yes, I had found a cut and sew by then. It was just phone call after phone call. I can't help you, but this person, try this. And it finally landed me in front of a cut and sew that worked. So
I love that. Again, it's like just go in and start asking questions. And you are phenomenal at just asking questions, finding the right people to ask questions to, digging into that. I think that's really cool. If I bring that back up to your point about the brand, starting with the end, your website says your home is where you gather, make memories, and spend time with the people you love. So the finishes and decor you carefully pick each season, set the stage for moments that matter. So you and I have talked about this before in terms of the porch pop. I want you to tell folks what a porch pop is and how you got that idea ultimately, but that's turning kind of the ordinary into an extraordinary. That you're able to see some of those things. So tell me about that quote in terms of what that means to you and the vision of South 23rd, and then sell me a porch pop.
Well, so back back to the beginning, when I had just left my position, and it was a couple weeks before, as I mentioned, our daughter's wedding. And I found myself, I love to decorate. I love to just do little tricks, just like Chris. And she inspires me, honestly. She has such an amazing eye, and I'm always striving to replicate what I see in these home decor magazines. And one day I just happened to come across a magazine article about a family, and um, I in this article was a picture of a family that had just remodeled this home, and the home was gorgeous and the family was adorable. But what caught my eye was the what the photographer had staged on the front walk, and that was some shrubs that were in a pot, but the pot was wrapped in burlap fabric. And I've thought to myself, that's not really new. That's something that we have done for years just to cover an ugly pot. But then after seeing page after page of beautiful fabrics, it got me wondering, what if we were to use some of that look or those fabrics and take your indoor space to your outdoor space? Because in the South, well, anytime in the summer in the northern areas, we love to be outside. We love to be around nature, but we love the look that we get when we decorate and make our home space ours. And so my messaging is really about taking your outdoor space from ordinary to extraordinary, in addition to trusting yourself. If you like that piece, if you love the look, it's your look, and you shouldn't run from that, because you picked that pillow, you picked that print, and you picked that fabric because you loved it, and trust yourself. So
Mm.
that was
I love
really
that.
where.
I think about the value that ordinary to extraordinary, and I think again you and Chris together and some of the ideas that come out in very common things in terms of family. The one I remember really well early on when Chris and I got married is that she would transfer the ketchup from the ketchup bottle into like this little glass bowl, and then put the ketchup bowl on the table. I'm like, that is so cool to take it from like the ketchup bottle that it's got the Heinz label or whatever sitting on the table to a very special container, if you will. And I just make that up about the porch pop is it takes that green plastic pot that you
Mhm.
get it at the hardware store, wherever you end up buying this flower, and creating something very special out of that in terms of what it looks like. That to me, if I'm really true about it, I'm like, I would have never done that myself. But
Mhm.
I believe when, it's almost like the peanut butter and jelly sandwich always tastes better when somebody else makes it for you,
That's exactly
kind of
right.
thing, right?
Yes.
And it's just like that flower pot. It's like that flower pot, the flower always smells better when I think when you kind of have that surrounding and make it just a little bit more special, or in terms of the word, the uncommon. And I think we as leaders, if we think about that as an idea, again, turning ordinary into extraordinary, even in the relationships that we have, okay, how do we turn it from ordinary into an extraordinary? So I think the porch pop, the can crusher, which I love the connection of the idea in terms of the innovation, the ketchup in a bowl versus just out of the ketchup bottle, are all
Yes.
things that are metaphors to me for how do we create that uncommon in our leadership as well in terms of what those changes go for. And I make up that you've been through so many things as you try to bring this idea, this extraordinary, into others' hands. And so you've been recognized for this idea. You have the Vanity Fair Leanne Morgan, which I love the fact that you had a chance to meet Leanne Morgan as well, and talk with her, but won a grant there. Two questions on that, just on the grant. How did you have the confidence to apply for that? Right? Because I make up. I know Susan from the past. Like there's a little bit of limiting belief that keeps us from doing things we want to do. But when you
Mhm.
actually won that, what did that do for your confidence and your drive?
So I think what was really cool, so she was on a tour, and she was on her just getting started tour. And when they announced at the beginning of the tour they were trying to promote and encourage women that were not necessarily in their younger ages, in their 20s, maybe 20s, 30s, but it was really about to empower women. And but she was just getting started in her comedic career. She was that, hence the name of her tour, Just Getting Started. And Vanity Fair just partnered with her, and they wanted to really encourage women that were a little bit older, had already done their family or not done their family, but just coming up with an idea to be an entrepreneur, start a business later in life. And as soon as I heard about that, that just resonated. It was so exciting, and I said, "Well, I'm just going to apply." It was an essay. I told them about my business, I told them how I came up with the idea and what I did, and so while I didn't win the monetary grant, I did win a product grant, and I was so excited because I felt like it must have bubbled to the top because there were many. I'm sure there were thousands of people that applied, but that made me feel really good because I feel very in a very similar lane as Leanne Morgan. She had raised her
Mm.
family, and even though she had had some times where she would have an opportunity to speak in front of groups and do some of her practice of her skits, but I didn't think. Sometimes it slows me down to think I'm in my 50s and here, what am I doing? I'm starting this company. I'm actually looking to try to get this into retail. And that seems very scary, but it just makes me feel I've been assured by other entrepreneurs that are telling me they're saying it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how old you are. If you have a dream and you have an idea, just roll with it. Just go, just do, right? So that's kind of where I landed with that whole Leanne Morgan grant. I was just excited to be even recognized and felt like it resonated.
Hey, listeners, I want to take a quick moment to share something special with you. Many of the topics and discussions we have on this podcast are areas where I provide coaching and consulting services for individuals and organizations. If you've been inspired by our conversation and are seeking a catalyst for change in your own life or within your team, I invite you to visit coachjohngallagher.com/free call to sign up for a free coaching call with me. It's an opportunity for us to connect, discuss your unique challenges, and explore how coaching or consulting can benefit you and your team. Okay, let's get back to the show. Well, I think so I love that. And part of the part that impacts me as I listen to it is finding someone to emulate as well in your style, someone who has a similar story to share. Frankly, that's really what the Uncommon Leader podcast is all about. That your story is going to resonate with someone who's thinking about that idea, who's a little, you said old. We're not old. You said old or older. I'm not sure.
Older, yeah. I'm not
Further
20.
along in our wisdom
There we
than
go.
many others in terms of getting started. And it's, yeah, you're exactly right. It's not that easy. I mean, I think whether it's a similar path and me starting out on my own 5 years ago as well, to your point, it's like, I don't know about this. And, for you, what I know about you, what I appreciate about you is positive energy, no doubt, is a key element of your success. Again, as a friend, as a mom, as a wife, but also as an entrepreneur and a business owner. So,
Thank you.
how do you maintain that positivity, especially in the challenging times that is early on in the launch of an entrepreneurial career?
So, uh, we're both really big fans of John Maxwell,
Hmm.
and one of his trainings, I believe, he said something to the effect of, "When you have a win, give yourself a day to celebrate your win, but when you have your losses, give yourself a day, get through your losses." And there have been challenges, and back to my um, a little more knowledge experience. What I lack in something, I seem to compensate in another. So where my technical challenges with some of the things on the computer or social media, that was challenged. But I feel that when I have a setback, I let myself feel and process that setback, and then the next day I
Mm.
pick up where I was, and I know that I am. if I focus, I get what I focus on. And I have to keep the eye on the prize, what I really want to do. And if it still excites me, then I want to just keep on going and figure out, okay, this didn't work, so let's try something else. And just having a positive attitude seems to make that flow a little easier. Does that make sense? I just
I'm following you absolutely. In fact, as you said that, it reminded me of a quote I shared with you prior to this interview about a week ago, and I'm looking it up on my phone. I'm being rude and looking at my phone as the time. But it was a quote that popped up 5 years ago as we were talking about the questions for this, and it was on my time hop. It said, "Never give up on something that you can't go a day without thinking about," from Winston Churchill. So I'll
I love
bet
that.
you thought about Porch Pop for a long time before you really kicked it off in terms of that idea and what that meant. But you never gave up on it. And how did keep that spirit, keep that fire going to get it started?
Um, Again, back to keeping the eye on the prize. It was something that I really loved. And then when I started telling people about it, they validated my thought and my idea. They would look at me and go, "Oh my goodness, I've never heard of this. I've never seen it before." And I knew at that point there was something there. There was something to share. And if I was going through this problem, someone else was going through this problem. They were finding themselves wanting a certain look and then heading to the store and not finding exactly what they were looking for and ultimately putting it off. And then they found themselves in a situation, which is exactly what happened to me. I tell the story about how um, I had bought, I love these seasonal plants and I would buy them. And then one day we were expecting guests and I was inside cleaning, getting ready. And my husband came to me and he said, "What's the plan with these plants out front?" And I'm like, "Well, what are you talking about?" He said, "There's all these ugly plants. They're in all these ugly pots. And what do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to replant them." He's like, "They're coming in 10 minutes. No, we're not doing this. They're going in the garage." And everyone lost. You know, I lost out because I'd taken the time to go to the nursery and buy all these beautiful flowers. And then my friends couldn't see them because they were in the garage. And ultimately, it was because I couldn't find what I was wanting. And if I'm having this problem, I'm not the only person having this problem. So let's fix it. Let's not complain about it. Let's stay positive and let's figure out a way to do something different.
I love that. I love that story. Filling a need again, and then identifying that again, back to that ordinary to extraordinary. I mean, you could have let it out there with the standard pots that they came in, but the solution you've created, I think, is really cool and fun. And again, uh, I can understand certainly the differences in the home. You've talked about before, and we know this. Dave and I are both engineers. That's how we ended up meeting back in college. Well, not in engineering school, but at Tailgaters. So that's probably a story we can leave for another podcast to have all four of us talking about that and how
Mhm.
that worked out. But you've had to in your business, you've had to balance what might be this creative and innovative spirit with business acumen. You're trying to run a business. How do you intentionally um, reconcile those two things?
It gets tricky. It's really easy to get down in the weeds. And I have a true confession. I mean, I have friends like yourself and other people in my life that say, you got to make a schedule. You got to stick to your schedule. And what doesn't get scheduled doesn't get tracked. That's my daughter. She's always trying to share with me that, you've got to stay on top of some of these things. And I have, all of my family will, our son is always trying to figure out how many times I'm touching something. What's going on with your inventory? And then I have my husband who's looking at it and going, this doesn't feel very lean. We've got to do something different with your process. And so I have all of these people touching all of these parts of my business, and I love it and I appreciate it. The struggle comes when I get so excited, I forget that I got to do all the parts. But I'm a solopreneur, right?
Hmm.
So I have to do all the things. But sometimes some of the other things, the paperwork, that catches up with you. So then you have to come back and just reset. You know what I
Yeah, and you
mean?
and I both read the 4-8 Principle, right? I mean, a book that
Yeah.
sits over here is one of the most influential books and it talks about at times you got to schedule your misery. And I can hear like,
Ugh.
I hate to do the paperwork part, but I'm going
Uh-huh.
to have to schedule this, not in my creative time, but I'm going to have to schedule this at some point so I can get it done. And the other thing you touched on that's very important for solopreneurs, especially to learn, is that there are other voices that you need to ask
Yeah.
for. I don't know if we get hung up as no unsolicited advice, and
Hmm.
we as friends have talked about that a lot. And like, we're gonna wait till you ask us, and then we'll give you some feedback versus just telling you like you got three voices, three engineers
I
in
know.
your household trying to tell you how to do things. Like, look, if I want your advice, I'll give it to you, and then I'll ask you whether or not you want to have some input. But again, I can imagine that's real. That challenge with three engineers is
They
is
all think
likely
a little
very real.
differently than, yeah,
Yeah,
they're different.
and I love that that helps make the world go round. Certainly a lot better. I love that. So, um, what's if you were talking with someone else who just needs to get started? They've been thinking about this idea, right, for a while, whatever that is, whether it's the porch pop or it's the can crusher or it's starting a coaching business or it's something like that. What's the best piece of advice you have for someone who's thinking about that you're talking to on this podcast right now to say what?
I think the biggest thing is just get started. Um, you know, if you are really excited about whatever you're thinking about doing, if there's a product or an idea that you're excited about, just move forward. Don't get analysis paralysis, right? You can think about it and think about it and think about it, but what are you doing? Just do, even if it's a baby step, even if it's just one thing a week or one thing. In my case, it was I try to do two or three. I try to touch this business multiple times a day because of the type of business and now the place where I am. I don't necessarily have to um, I kind of get stopped, right? I'm direct to consumer sales, but I'm working on future patterns and I'm working on new shows and I'm researching all of this stuff. So, but it has to move forward. It's not
Mhm.
going to go somewhere until you start touching it and doing something to push it forward. And don't be afraid. Just do and do it scared, right?
And do it
Because
scared, but do it
do it
anyway.
scared.
That's
Yeah.
right.
There's yes, you're going to be vulnerable. Yes, you're putting yourself out there, but the reward is so huge when you break through and you get one thing done and then another thing comes. And the more you do it, it's like running. The more you do it, the easier it becomes for the most part,
Mm.
unless you're injured. But
Yeah, but no, but but it's stepping outside your comfort zone. However you end up looking at it. Like it's not easy. And again, creativity, innovation is in your strength zone.
mhm.
Relying on others or putting disciplines in place for the structure is very important. One of the ones I've seen that you posted this on Instagram recently was the big ass calendar that you have. How's that working out for you? I mean, that thing, Chris is like, I got to have one of those too.
I
What is,
know
how's
they're
that working out
great.
for you?
Jesse Itzler, he's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I try to book my shows months and months in advance. So, for instance, I have 4 shows already booked for the fall season, and it just kind of gives you a perspective of I was writing them all down on my whiteboard, and that just didn't really help me because there'll be a time that I'll find out about an event and I have to go back and look through my calendar. So that calendar just helps remind me that you're not stagnant. You're moving
Hmm.
forward. You've got plans. Don't, it almost is a little bit of a motive. It actually is a very big motivator because it's me seeing that I have deliverables coming, right? So I see that I have a show coming in 2 weeks, or I would show it to you today, but it's downstairs. But it's it was my first one that I've ever purchased, and I think it was a great investment. I really like it.
Well, I mean, I love the console. I kind of put a pull-out calendar on 8.5 by 11 that looks out, you know, for the year as to where I'm going to be and those sites. So I love the concept behind it, but I really love, it's the old good, better, best, the idea of a big calendar right in front of you says, here's where I need to be. Because
Hmm.
again, and I would encourage, here's a coach unsolicited advice. Sorry, comes out is to not you color code that big calendar with the business side, but it also allows you the opportunity to put the family side into it as well. As you're still, while we may be empty nesters, you're still a mom, and you still have to travel to see your kids, or they travel to see you, and seeing friends. All those things, putting those big rocks into that big calendar as well,
Hmm.
can be very visible to make sure that you can see from a short distance away if I have some balance, because as a solopreneur, as you say, you're doing it all. And there's no doubt that it can take it all if you
Hmm.
allow it 24/7, because it never shuts off. I mean, B2C never shuts off. You've got the website that makes that happen. So I have one more question for you, just in terms of about Susan Campbell, and then kind of we'll get some contact information from you, and I'll move on to the last question. But you've mentioned this a couple times in the interview about God or your faith. How has your faith played a part in this journey as well for you as a solopreneur?
Well, I totally, I'm sorry, you're gonna get me emotional. Um, I couldn't do this without God. I mean, he has held my hand through all of the challenges, all the questions, all the doubts, and I know that I have like a it feels like a daily prayer of you gifted me this. Thank you.
Mm.
I just completely attribute that, and I know that there's a plan out there, and he's put it in front of me, and but I need to be ready to do the work. I can't expect it just to fall into my life and into my lap. But he does move mountains, and he does open opportunities. He does open up doors, and he puts me in the right place. And it's just having the discernment of knowing what's a good fit and what isn't a good fit, knowing what shows to go to. I struggle a little bit with, exactly where am I supposed to be? So, because my time is important, and I want to find the places that build the momentum. Does that make sense?
I'm
But
following you 100%. I mean, again,
yes.
as I listen through the parable of the talents, to make sure you're using the gifts that he's given you to make a difference. I absolutely
Hmm.
love that. Talking about he has a plan, and I can go back to Jeremiah 29:11. We talk about he's got a plan for you. It's not always perspective, because there are some bad times in the Old Testament with regards to how Jeremiah was talking about that, but he's got a plan. And all the way back to your very first story about childhood, like it started there.
Hmm.
He's always been with you on that journey as
Hmm.
you've moved through this, and the people that he continues to put in your life, and the opportunities for those to provide you that guidance. So I appreciate you sharing. I didn't. There was no intent behind the question to get you emotional. I mean, I could probably
That's
count on
okay.
one hand the number, but I understand that in terms of that importance, and I can see that. So I appreciate you sharing that with the
Thank you.
listeners as well. The listeners are going to want to stay in touch with you and learn more about Porch Pop and about Susan Campbell. Where can they find out more about those things?
No, great. And yes, you can reach me on all the socials. I'm at South 23rd or south23rd.com. We have a website. And if you're interested, you can hop on and get on the mailing list. That's something that I'm working on now. And I also have some seasonal blogs on there, so you can see that.
Hmm.
But I post daily on Facebook, Instagram, and then I have a YouTube channel and a Pinterest channel. So you can check all those out.
Fun Instagram follow, folks. I'll put the links in the show notes for all those different handles for Susan. Get out there and
Thank you.
follow her. And yes, I just learned today about her YouTube channel as well. And she's got some fun video shorts there where she talks about even some other products that bring some joy to her life, if you will, as you go forward. So, Susan, I know I've appreciated the time that you've invested
Thank
today
you.
with the listeners of the Uncommon Leader podcast. I will finish you with the same way I finish all the other listeners. I'm going to give you a billboard. You can put that thing anywhere you want to. What's the message you're going to put on that billboard, and why do you put that message on that billboard?
I think my billboard would say, trust your intuition. I just have needed to lean into what I really felt was the feeling of what your gut feeling, right? So I think that that's incredible. It's more times than not led me to be in the right place at the right time and make a right call
Hmm.
in business and in personal life. So I think trust your intuition would be my billboard.
Love it. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Friend,
This was great.
this is a really good time. I enjoyed it a bunch as well, and I know the folks have enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Be well,
Thank
okay?
you.